You might draw any number of conclusions about this week's topic when you see the setting behind me. Yeah, as a parent, you've probably spent at least a few hours in bleachers similar to this, or seated in a lawn chair and watching your son or your daughter compete. But before you were in the stands, can you remember times in your younger life when you were on the field? Any kind of field, or a stage, or at the front of a classroom, or in some other place where your performance was on display for others to see. Even today, you may get a little nervous when you have to perform in any sense of that word, and to perform in front of peers, or customers, or a boss. We don't get performance anxiety, yeah, that's the more scholarly term for it, because we're confident and we know we'll succeed. We develop this bad case of the nerves because of the fear of failing. You and I, to this day, are at times nervous, anxious, because we may fail at something we know is important, something which we've been called on to do, and do in a setting where others will notice. You know, when all those elements are combined, it's really no wonder at all that we have a fear of failing. Even using the word fail, or failure, or screw up can bring back some very vivid memories. Most were unpleasant, some were embarrassing. Others may have brought tears or even sudden fits of rage. Why not pause the video here, take a bit of time and swap some stories from your youthful times. Stories of failure, which you're now comfortable to talk about. We'll pick this up again when you get back. In thinking about failure recently, I've had the chance to discover some things that are true for all of us as adults and which will certainly be helpful for each of your children to learn. Here's the first item I believe every young person needs to understand. No one bats 1,000 when they're trying to do new things. Think of it. Every week, in school, in the sports field, in the band room, and even out in social settings, your kids are trying to master things which they've never done before, or which they've only recently started to do. There's simply no way they're going to get them right, even most of the time. Is it any wonder we don't let would-be pilots practice flying in loaded passenger planes? People who are learning new things make mistakes, sometimes lots of mistakes. If you don't want to make mistakes, then you should never attempt anything new or bold or beyond your current ability. It's a sure way not to fail big, but it's also a sure way never to accomplish anything bold or great. And that is something every child needs to understand. Here's another point I was reminded of in my reflecting. As a young adult, I just assumed that other people had figured out how to make things work, even when I had no clue about certain matters. It seemed obvious at the time that something must be wrong with me or with my approach, which wasn't wrong with others and their approach. Not wanting to look as foolish as I already felt, I kept quiet and hoped I could bluff my way through with as little embarrassment as was possible. And hopefully without anybody knowing how uncertain and how scared I really was. What I didn't know then, and I do know today, is that people have to learn how to do things. They aren't born knowing, don't just grow up into knowing, and don't automatically know just because they acquire a responsibility. They need to ask questions once they discover what they don't yet know. Yet isn't that exactly what we learn not to do in school settings? I mean, honestly, do you remember those times the teacher asked if there were any questions? Well, usually there weren't, right? Well, why? No one wanted to be the one person to ask a question in class. Remember what that felt like? Or remember what it was like to be singled out for extra attention from the teacher because you didn't grasp something? The pain of feeling foolish and the pain of failure. Wow, they're almost identical, aren't they? I was often tempted as my two sons were going through school and they would come home with less than average grades to call up one teacher or another and ask if he or she didn't feel like a failure for not being able to communicate essential information in ways which could help my sons understand it. And that brings us to another essential understanding about failure. The things that constitute failure are often a standard created by others who feel that they have a better grasp of ideas or skills. Do you remember the requirements for moving ahead when you were in school? Yeah, your grade average had to be sufficient. You had to be moderately good at everything in order to pass. While we as adults understand the reasoning behind that, What our kids will often be stuck with as they grow up is an idea that we must be good at a number of things in order to get through life. I know skilled professionals who are simply outstanding at one thing, and yet they don't even possess a modest amount of capability in other things. Success in life isn't about being good on average, it's about being great at the things which really matter. But generally, things that matter are learned over time and with great care and practice. They are learned at the price of numerous false starts and missteps. We as parents must work with our children, whatever their age, in helping them to understand the difference between fatal setbacks and failures, as compared with those other failures which the rest of the world may brand as failure, but which can be the gateway to future success. Very few failures in life are of the fatal type. Life certainly has deadlines. We must get certain things right before time runs out, before the quarter runs out, before the year runs out. But in life, failure along the way doesn't count against the final result. Ask the lab technician who has 100 bad results before he gets a breakthrough to a new product, a product that's worth millions. Is his performance judged on the average of the past 100 attempts? Well, no way. What matters is that he learned from each step and reached a great outcome. Ask a husband and a wife who keep working it out through the difficult disagreements and tough relationship times. Is the end product the average of the past 5 years of effort? No, of course not. It's the end product of failed attempts that lead to a better relationship. It's the average of nothing, but it's simply the final outcome that matters. Most failures are actually only a type of feedback, which helps us to see and understand what we don't yet know or know how to do. And in that sense, failure is a messenger sent to us to provide us valuable guidance on what doesn't work. And it's guidance to help us to reach objectives we felt were actually important enough to begin with. Have some great discussion in your group this week. But more importantly, take the things that you're learning and make these ideas the subject of some great discussions around your family's dinner table or at other opportune moments, because that's where the real fruit will actually be produced.